I always looked down at my children as they slept, the moonlight hitting their faces softly. They looked so peaceful. Well, they were my children, and I would do anything to protect them. That night, I made a vow that I would never harm them, no matter what circumstance. I was a good mother. A good mother never harms her children. The days began to get more harried and more stressful. My kids could see the dark circles that began to form under my eyes and the wrinkles that creased my forehead. Work began getting harder and harder, and it had been difficult to work as a nurse in the late night shift to begin with. My children remained blissfully unaware of the fact that we currently had a deadly pandemic sweeping the globe. I never would have thought a zombie apocalypse could actually ever happen. I was a rational and sensible person, and supernatural had never been a great concern of mine. However, the hospitals became flooded with corpses that have gone cold and suddenly start screaming again when they were wheeled to the morgue. What has occurred is very difficult to ignore. The hardest part was seeing the children that were occasionally wheeled in, wailing in despair and trying to rip out the throats of your orderlies. As the doctors experimented in trying to find a cure, I sat with my fellow nurses as we plugged our ears and tried to block out the screaming. Only small patches of the world had been affected so far, so no extreme emergency measures had been taken yet. All we wanted to was return home and make sure our families were safe, but going home would lead to nothing but nightmares of grayed, decaying skin and white, pupilless eyes. I tried desperately to keep a symbol of normality around my children. I would come home, smile, tell them Mommy had another rough night at work. Yeah, I was terrified to sleep during the day, terrified that when I opened my eyes, my own children would be staring at me with their jaws slack, white, unblinking eyes. When it came to work, the only thing that kept me awake anymore was the screaming. My stomach always turned over when I saw children being wheeled into the incinerator. Surely a mother could never harm her children like that, even if she had lost all reason. Surely maternal instinct was stronger than whatever this disease was that gripped our world like a vice. In the morning, lights early rays, I got off the bus that sent me to and from work, and then collapsed into my bed. It had been a long, hard night keeping at the research lab. My husband fixed the covers over me and tucked me in more securely. I grunted in thanks. In the other room, I could hear my children begin to wake. I wonder how long I could fool them into thinking that everyone was simply on a long holiday. It had been obvious from the start that our little local hospital was doomed to fail. The bus no longer came for me. I simply stayed home and cared for my children, and immediately I finally managed to sleep more comfortably. When I could control my wrestling times, I couldn't seem to shake my night owl habit, though. Every night I would kiss my 3-year-old goodnight, smooth hair from the hair of my 9-year-old's forehead, and gently squeeze my 10-year-old's hand. Then I would softly close the door and go about doing some busy work. I'd never taking my eyes off that door. I would ensure that my children were set very safe tonight. Soon the dead began shuffling into the door, pressing themselves against our windows. My children learned the truth that day. My husband took out his rifle and shot 2 pallid, gray faces that managed to stick their hands underneath the front door. Something else was disturbing me, though. My right hand became hurting, like something awful. And I started getting this constant headaches. At the back of my mind, a thread of doubt shaked out, whispering something truly chilled to me whilst I lay in bed trying to sleep. Maybe you were wrong. I had offered to take part in an experiment which, if proven successful, could make me immune to the pathogen communicated by the undead. I was not entirely familiar with the plan that the doctors had described, but I realized that if they succeeded, I might be able to protect my family. If it failed, Well, my incinerator just can't do much harm to my family either. Obviously, in addition to injecting me with a serum, had to see if it actually worked. I allowed myself to be bitten on the right hand when nothing happened, the feeling of relief overwhelmed me. The doctors were besides themselves with the authority of triumph. It was too bad. The next day, one of the young doctor's assistants had himself infected and destroyed the entire lab. I was the only person on the planet who could be bitten by this adversary and survive. Are you sure? The next morning I awoke. How strange. Instead of tucking in the children into bed, I oped the first good night's sleep in a while, rolled over to my husband, gently tapped him on the shoulder. He turned to me on his side and looked at me. White, pupilless eyes met hazel brown ones that swiftly widened in fear as I realized what had transpired. My husband didn't even have time to scream before I broke his neck and sank my teeth into his throat. Feeling the warm gush of blood in my mouth, I feasted upon his innards, driven by an undescribable hunger, an instinct akin to the one of a tiger or a lion. Once my primal hunger had satisfied, I left his still warm body on our bedroom floor and drunkenly shuffled out of the room to my children. Looked upon the three of them as they stirred in their sleep. Strange. I felt no desire to break their bones or feast upon their flesh. Perhaps, no matter how primitive I became, I would not forget my children. Perhaps this is the restraint was maternal instinct. After all, a good mother never harms her children. I couldn't say the same for their father, though, who had begun to stir from where I only left him minutes ago. I awoke with a start as I heard a loud bang out in the street. I hated noise. That happened before 8:30 a.m. Well, I have OCD, and so the tiniest things can really set me off. Annoyed, I pulled down my bathrobe and walked out the front door to see what the commotion was. I stopped to fix a flower that was drooping in the wrong direction. Immediately, I was assaulted with the world's imperfections. I gave a silent yell as I surveyed my block. It looked like a disaster zone. A house down the street was on fire, people running out of it screaming. Overturned trash cans and makeshift sandbag barricades lined the street. Gave a small and turned on my heel and back to my house, locking all 4 of the bolts on my way in to make sure all my windows were boarded up properly, ensuring everything that seemed okay. I moved over to the living room, grabbing my orange juice container and pouring myself a glass before I sat down on the sofa. I flipped on the television and the hum of a backdrop generator kicked up as the power usage increased. For the 4th day straight, the state's emergency broadcast system was airing. I sighed and returned to the kitchen to make myself a piece of toast. I was tired of the broadcast. I was hoping that they'd put it back on schedule with the morning news soon. The governor has issued a state of emergency. This broadcast has been tailored to your area. A short pause. Residents of San Diego and the Imperial Counties are urged to make their way to the Red Cross centers in San Diego and El Centro. If you are unable to leave your home, lock and barricade your doors and windows. Arm yourself with any weapons that you can. Firearms are most effective, especially when aimed at the head. Remember to stay hydrated if infected. The CDC has been so far unsuccessful in finding a cure, but it is noted that staying hydrated keeps the immune system functioning properly. If an infected has already passed and returned to your household, do not hesitate to infuse them. We repeat, Do not hesitate. Remember, the Red Cross centers in San Diego and El Centro, military camps throughout the state. Please stay safe. I recognized those closing words, and switched off the TV to conserve power. Another loud bang could be heard outside. I jolted, alarmed at the noise. I swore under my breath. I straightened up the sofas and the pillow as I stood up. Making my way back to the front door, another bang. Looking through the peephole, I saw a disgusting figure who was knocking its head on my front door. It was one of the zombies. With rotting gray skin and yellow eyes, there was festering wound on its neck. Its dirty, blood-stained clothes accented its repulsive, horrified. I stepped back. I only seen zombies on the television, never in real life. I wasn't really sure what to do. Suddenly a gunshot roared across the street, rippling into the zombie's skull. It fell immediately, its brain and blood all over my porch. I nearly fainted. So much mess. I heard a loud whoop and then the rippling sound of a motorcycle engine. I realized that it wasn't safe in my home anymore. But with OCD, I found safety in what was familiar. The crowded, dirty city was not familiar. I knew it was foolish, and later I regretted it, but I chose to stay in my home. I could hear the zombies becoming restless outside later in the evening, wailing late into the night. A few times I heard screams of the living trying to escape. One sounded like Mrs. Avery, 2 houses down. Another like Mr. King, around the corner. I vowed to try to escape, while I still could the next day. With a thudding of zombies against my door, I fell into a fitful sleep. The next morning, after gathering everything that would fit into my car and my Smith & Wesson, I backed out of my driveway for the last time. The air conditioning in the car cycled, and the putrid stench of decay and vomit. The smell was overwhelming. I glanced around, just trying to see if there was anyone nearby. Only zombies. They rushed over my car, banging their bloody fists in my beautiful Lexus. One smeared in trails all over the window. I gave a small yelp and floored the gas pedal to get away. Minutes later, I was driving down the freeway. Overturned cars littered the road, with only a few struggling bodies trapped within the wreckages. I hoped that those struggling were undead. I passed the hospital with large, crude banners reading, "No help here. Try mercy," written in black paint. I shuddered at the thought of the hospital patients trapped in their beds as the undead came limping down the hallway. I was amazed that everything had gone in ruin so quickly. Pent up inside my perfect house, I had no idea where the rest of humanity was, facing out in the world. All of a sudden, a zombie came trotting in front of my car. Noticing it, I instinctively swerved to try to avoid it, which proved to be a mistake. I slammed into the center of a divide, and I was going about 65 miles an hour, flipping a few times before coming to a stop upside down. My arms were twisted in less than a glorifying position. I had multiple gashes of cuts and broken glass. Worst of all was the fact that I couldn't move my legs. I didn't know what was wrong. There was blood all over the place, gushing like a fountain. So much crimson, disgusting blood. I began to hyperventilate. Soon I was hysterical. "Help!" I screamed. "Oh God, someone please help me! Please!" Bad idea. The zombies heard my loud cries and began to migrate over to my car, where I couldn't move my legs, where I was really defenseless. I screamed more, wildly trying to attempt to get myself free, but I simply couldn't. Eventually, as the first zombie began to reach through the window, I accepted my fate. Delirious with blood loss, I found myself with a childish grin. I felt dizzy as I said, "Just don't make a mess."